Hey everybody, here's something completely different. This is actually a War Thunder video. I had been contemplating doing some War Thunder stuff for quite a while. Actually, I'd already recorded a few games, but just never got around to uploading them. And so here is a replay of me playing the other day with my friends Nerty and Jekko. So we're playing in a platoon, and I decided to bring along my T-34 prototype, while they brought along their Locusts. We have, of course, painted our tanks bright red, because why not? And if I can just figure out how to get the camera angle to work, there we go. Now you can see the same view I had. I am not quite sure how to get the HUD to turn on. It seems Gaijin had actually fixed the replay system somewhat. It has this handy little UI down the bottom, and it actually seems to run fairly smoothly. Previously it would freeze up constantly and there was no UI to speak of. Now you even have scoreboards, which is nice. Oh, you can even click the map to full screen it. Jesus. So anyway, anyone who reads my blog and or the Mittani may have seen my poster a while back now about sort of comparisons between World of Tanks and War Thunder, and while I think the two games cover different niches, I did state in a way that made quite a lot of people very angry that War Thunder felt very unpolished and kind of half-assed compared to World of Tanks. It feels a lot better now. World of Tanks certainly wasn't perfect when it first came out of beta, but it did feel a lot more polished and more complete. War Thunder felt more janky, and a lot of features didn't work properly or just weren't well implemented. Gaijin have gone a long way towards fixing that in the past 6 months or so. Tank movement's still a little questionable at times, and as you can see, the netcode's not the best. That was one shot, but I appeared to fire two because of lag. And they actually added something which I'd been hoping for a while, which is because the shot feedback's kind of weird in this game, partly because of the netcode, partly because of my high ping, and partly just because of the way things work in War Thunder. It was difficult to tell sometimes where you were actually hitting somebody, if you were hitting them or not. Without going too deep into the documentation, it was impossible to tell just how in-depth the damage mechanics were. And so, you know, I'd see shells hit the ground in front of me and then I'd get damaged and think, wow, this game has a really, really shitty fucking shot feedback. And it turns out that actually I was wrong. The damage models are quite detailed, maybe not 100% accurate, but very, very detailed. And those shots were actually hitting me. What was happening was the shell would hit the ground, fragment on the ground, and the fragments would then bounce up and hit the tank. You can't actually see it in the replay, I guess it hasn't been implemented here yet, but the game now has a little picture-in-picture camera that displays the outcome of each hit on an enemy tank, and also when your own tank is destroyed, it displays a cutaway diagram showing a sort of instant replay of where the enemy shell came in and what it did once it got into your tank, which is really, really nice. Not only does it actually give you some of the shot feedback that you were missing before, just because of the way traces worked, but it also gives you a much better sense of what's inside these tanks and how they work. So whereas a lot of new World Tanks players are left basically guessing where to aim for different modules, in War Thunder you can learn pretty fast. And it's a nice piece of eye candy to look at. At some point I might try and record some actual live gameplay, and then you'll be able to see it in action. But in any case, it certainly makes it a lot easier to tell when you've actually hit somebody and done some damage. Before it was really difficult, and it just felt frustrating putting shell after shell into even a small light tank and not feeling like you were doing anything. Now you can actually see why your shells don't appear to be doing anything. The movement in arcade is still a bit too skatey. The tanks feel like they're on ice sometimes, particularly on hard surfaces and at any kind of speed. They tend to slide a lot. If you try and turn it all at any kind of speed, they'll slide. In realistic battles, they seem a bit better. I haven't had a chance to play very many sim battles, I think only one or two since the last couple patches, but the tank controls feel much better there. There's still the issue where your automatic driver tries to change gears while you're in the middle of a turn, which obviously fucks up your turning radius and makes it really difficult to get control response, but it is a lot better than it was before. The physics is still a little questionable, so it's still very much possible to bump tanks and push them around and flip them over and so on. But the main issue I had before was the actual control of your own tank, and since that's now a little bit improved, I'm quite a bit happier. Worth note though, you do still get stuck on tanks. You'll get hung up on them, and even though you may not appear to be physically touching on your screen, you can't pull yourself away from them. It's, again, the physics are kind of janky. As you can see there, I bumped, I think that was Nerty, and our tank's kind of rubber banded around a bit. Of course, it is fairly early days for War Thunder Ground Forces. It hasn't been out that long, but it did take them a while to kind of get some of the real basic quality of life stuff out. Even back in the day, the interface was useless. It's a lot better now, as you can probably tell. We have a proper minimap with proper indicators that you can actually see, and scoreboards now, which we didn't have before, and a much nicer replay interface. Some of the maps are a bit questionable. A lot of the time you get shot from places you don't even realise there are enemies in. They're pretty open, they have plenty of cover, but at times it just gets a bit too hectic. And some of the maps, this one's not too bad, but some of the maps have really obvious choke points. In fact, one of the maps, basically, as soon as you leave spawn, you have sight on the enemy, unless you immediately turn off to one side. Graphically, I can't really complain. The terrain looks pretty nice. The vegetation's a little jarring. I'm still not sure what it is. Like, I really wish I did. But just something about the vegetation doesn't quite look right to me. I think it's the way the actual detail objects, the grass blades and bushes and stuff are shaded, and then, they're really contrasted with the ground. As you can see there, they really stand out. They don't blend very well, whereas in World of Tanks, there's a bit more grass density, even though it doesn't draw as far out, and it blends a lot better. I think that's the main thing, but it's a minor issue. The tanks themselves look pretty decent. I've said it before, the World of Tanks textures are more accurate. The models in both are pretty accurate. The World of Tanks ones are just a little more accurate, but the big difference is the textures. In War Thunder, you have just general wear and tear all over the tank, in the manner a 3D artist would expect a tank to wear and tear, whereas in World of Tanks, they've kind of done research into where the crew would step up to get onto the tank, and where shells would likely hit it, and where equipment would be usually carried on it, just so they can get the paint scrapes and rubs in the exact right places. It looks a lot better for it. But I'm not going to complain about War Thunder's looks. It's not a bad looking game by any measure. And the external destruction on the tanks is really nice. If a shell hits, an external storage bin or a fender or something, it'll bend it or split it apart or knock it clean off your tank. So that's a nice detail. Also, of course, the open-top vehicles have crews, which they do not in World of Tanks, for numerous reasons. One of my favourite things about War Thunder is the whippy aerials. I really want them in World of Tanks. Something else that's worth noting, Gaijin actually got round to fully animating suspensions. You have to enable it in your options for graphics, but they are properly animated now, and as far as I can tell, all of the tanks have them. So no more goofy looking animated wheels with static suspension arms, which was really weird before. So I think I'll be playing quite a lot more War Thunder now, especially as my connection to NA West gets to the point where I can't even play that, let alone East. And also as pubbies ruin World of Tanks for the next several months trying to get their missions done. And, War Thunder just scratches that itch that World of Tanks can't quite get to. One thing I'm eagerly looking forwards to, which I'm sure Gaijin will do at some point, is actual historically accurate reticles for all the different tank gun sights. I would really enjoy that. But for now, the default one is good enough. It's also, although you won't see it in this match because I wasn't using it, it's also backlit and animated, so you can actually dial in the range, and you've got night lighting there, so if you're fighting in the dark you can light the reticle and have a bit more contrast, so you can see what you're doing, of course. One thing I should mention is that in arcade battles, at least, aircraft kind of act not quite as kill streaks, but you get a certain number of them per battle, and basically whoever readies up in whatever aircraft first gets to fly it, and then other people can join in. It's classified as an event, and you have a couple per battle. And they take control of AI planes that circle off around the edges of the map, and they fly in and strafe tanks or shoot down other planes or whatever. It's kind of ridiculous. You know, it's really cool to have planes buzzing around, bombing people and shooting each other down and crashing and stuff. One important thing to note, planes can't, well, they can do that. I just got dive bombed by a Stuka. Planes can't kamikaze tanks. They can certainly fly into them, but it doesn't do any damage. It just, you know, scares the crap out of whoever's driving the tank if they didn't see it coming. But they certainly can bomb, strafe, and rocket them, and if you are any good at aiming, you'll basically be guaranteed at least 1 or 2 tank kills per aircraft. Particularly if you've got rockets and bombs, guns don't do so much. And, you know, you can probably imagine how that's a problem. The tank drivers can't do much about it other than just weave like mad and hope you miss them. And, you know, you do have anti-aircraft vehicles in the game, but a lot of pubbies either can't aim with them or think that they're for fighting tanks, not for fighting aircraft. Anyway, having got my T-34 blown up, finally, I decide to pull out the T-50, which is an absolute comedy wagon in War Thunder, and probably one of the most fun low-tier tanks to play. Meanwhile, Nerty is in his Lee, which is just as big of a piece of shit in War Thunder as it is in World of Tanks. Nerty was actually the first one to paint his tanks bright red. He has a fire engine red chassis, and he just kind of went from there. And after seeing it, I couldn't resist it. I had to paint all of mine bright red as well. It was actually really funny because we played a couple of realistic and simulator battles after this, and even in the simulator battles where, you know, you don't have HUD and you basically rely on camouflage to avoid detection, are bright red tanks driving around, standing out so well you could see them from about 1 kilometer away, somehow flanked the enemy team without being spotted and killed them. I don't know how. Like, you can see a tank this color from the other side of the map. It's so obvious. As you can see here, there is no vertical stabilizer in these tanks. Every little bump and jolt throws your aim off something fierce, and the turret traverse, of course, is limited as well. The T-50 has a hand-crank turret, and so it takes forever to turn, making it kind of difficult to circle people effectively. War Thunder, of course, is trying to fill in the more realism-oriented side of tanks, while the tanks has arcade locked down pretty hard. War Thunder's simulator mode isn't really a simulator. I've spoken at length in various threads on various forums about what I think of War Thunder calling itself a simulator. Its aircraft are all kinds of broken, flight models are all wrong. One of my first memories of playing simulator, what is now called simulator battles in War Thunder, was originally called full real battles, was going into a spin in a Spitfire because I tried to get into a turn fight with somebody. And if there's one thing I know about Spitfires, they should not be stalling and spinning at the kind of speed they would normally be in a fight at. You know, I've played that many flight sims. I grew up on flight sims. I have a fair idea what to expect, and War Thunder kind of took that and threw it out the window. It's certainly fun, but I wouldn't call it a simulator. What it is sort of a more authentic feeling experience. It's a more immersive experience, certainly, and the tanks definitely follow that trend. If you want a simulator, go buy Steel Beasts, not War Thunder. But if you want a lot of fun, some quick, easy games with your friends, and you don't really want to deal with World of Tanks' arcade sort of perspective on things, this is the game that you should try out. So let's have a look at another replay here. May as well, so I can talk a little more too. I will have to try and figure out how to get the little picture-in-picture to show, because I would really like to show that. If I can't figure out how to get it shown replays, I'll record a live game, so you'll be able to see it there. Just waiting for everyone to spawn in at the moment, which is why we are spectating a TU2. This match was played with Insurgent Dude, otherwise known as Arachnid from Face Punch. He has his own YouTube channel where he uploads many humorous videos of Insurgency, Stalker, Men of War, and God knows what else, as well as War Thunder. And you should definitely go check his channel out. Particularly some of his War Thunder videos he's filmed with Russian friends of his. They're absolutely hysterical. Anyway, I'm just waiting for my tank to spawn in here, and then it should automatically switch to my perspective. Again, rolling in my T-34, the prototype T-34, or sorry, no, the 1940 model T-34. Very similar to the prototype, just a slightly longer gun barrel. It doesn't have the spotlight over the gun. A few other minor differences, but it handles very much the same. And for some reason, it hasn't found my tank yet. Here we are. This is me. As you can see, even at night, the bright red T-34 stands out pretty well. Arachnid's brought his SMK to the battle. That's right, the SMK. Yes, both turrets are functional. And in fact, a lot of the newer tanks, particularly the American tanks, have functional machine guns too. Not just coax guns, but pretty much every machine gun on them is functional, which is really amusing when you see like a M2 light or something driving around, all these machine guns blazing. They can damage some of the lighter armored vehicles. They can also fuck up anti-aircraft vehicles since they have basically no armor, and they can bring down aircraft if you're really lucky. I do know that War Thunder has infantry in it. If you watch some of Phantom or Goon165, whichever name you know him by, some of his old War Thunder videos, you can actually see infantry on the ground in air scenarios. So I know infantry exists in the game, but whether Gaijin plan to implement them in ground forces, I do not know. Straight away, I pick out a target, find myself a Sherman, single him out, and murder the crap out of him. The Sherman is probably the strongest of the low tier tanks. It's actually one of the stronger tanks at any tier. But if you manage to find a way to get around them, they're pretty easy to kill. Their frontal armor is quite formidable. The early model T-34s can't handle them frontally, except at very, very close range. And their guns are more than enough to knock out the T-34. As you saw there, 2 shells went out. That was only 1. It's just that the way tracers work in this game is really weird. And so if you're lagging at all, you'll often see 2 shots go out where there was only 1. Again, that's a huge reason the picture-in-picture comes in handy for judging where you've hit somebody, or if you've hit them, in fact. Another T-34 runs up on me, and it's curtains. Not much I can do about that. And here we go. You can see exactly what happened. The shell came in through the fuel tanks on the left side and then straight to the engine. Not to be deterred, I spawned back in the T-34 prototype, but just for a moment, let's take a look at Arachnid's SMK. Look at this fucking thing. Holy shit. As you can see, both turrets work. Both turrets are tracking where he aims. You can control them individually or as a pair. You may have also noticed the machine gun, the Dushka, in the back of the main turret wiggling. That's because it also is tracking targets. Anyway, while he gets styled on by medium tanks, let's jump back to my perspective. By this time I had spawned in a Hurricane and was able to make a quick rocket attack. You have a certain amount of time to perform whatever you're doing in a plane before the AI takes control again. As you can see, I've expanded my rocket so it's just strafing some guy to put the wind up him. Doesn't really do anything. 303s aren't going to hurt a tank anytime soon. And as you can see, there goes my Hurricane. Happily victory rolling off into the distance under the control of the AI. And by into the distance, I mean almost into the ground. In fact, it looks like it is actually going to go into the ground. Once you lose control of the aircraft, you go back into control of your tank. Your tank can be killed while you're controlling an aircraft, so you have to be really careful about where you park before you pull one in. Quite often I've actually been bombed by the person I've been trying to shoot down in a plane. Not pleasant. And here we see something the T-34 excels at. Just going like a demon straight into the enemy's flank and then murdering them. The night maps are actually really pretty. I haven't seen any much darker than this. Usually the maps take place either in broad daylight or sort of dawn or dusk. I don't think I've seen any inclement weather in tanks, though I've seen plenty of it in planes. In fact, I've had some aircraft matches in War Thunder with weather so obnoxious you wouldn't be flying in it. You can't even see your own wingtips. As you just heard, our sector's under artillery barrage. Now, medium tanks and light tanks, I don't think heavies can do it, get the ability to call in artillery strikes. These aren't like, well, the tanks, these are targeted strikes on a grid square. It used to be, it'd give you a sort of a view from about 20-30 meters above your position across sort of diagonally at the area ahead of you. It was a bitch to aim. So what they've actually done now is it brings up the map and then you can click on any area within a certain distance of you, and the size of the cursor and corresponding accuracy of the artillery strike is based on how far you are from that point. Obviously some places can't be artillery, like say spawn zones. You can call strikes on yourself if you feel the need to. It's not, you know, a single shell descending from the heavens and ruining your day like it is in World of Tanks. It's an actual barrage. Typically, the first shell won't hit you. In fact, typically it'll take the entire barrage to finally land one on you. They're sometimes more of an annoyance than anything, but they're there to deter camping, because if you sit still in the middle of an artillery barrage, inevitably something's going to hit you and fuck you up. Whether it just damages modules or actually kills your tank, you're going to have a bad time. So it's good at deterring people from just camping out in a choke point. It's really good at stopping them from doing that, actually. Looks like the X-ray camera's playing up a little here, but as you can see, that guy just wiped out my turret crew. I think the picture-in-picture is probably the single best feature that's been added to this game so far, just because of not only the fact it makes up for the game's questionable shot feedback, but it's just a really handy feature that World of Tanks doesn't have and probably never will have. It looks cool, it makes it easy to learn how to play. It makes it fun to see exactly what you did to a tank. It's kind of like playing Sniper Elite 2, but with tanks, basically. As you can probably tell, the T-50 goes like an absolute rocket, but it's not the fastest tank in the game. In fact, if you get a chance to see a Walker Bulldog in action, they are ridiculous. Now, one thing I should note is at the moment War Thunder doesn't allow you to zoom out any more than this. This is the maximum zoomed out extent of third person. You can zoom in and it will put you basically above your cupola. It's good for sort of observing to your direct front without going into the gun sight. And it's also the same perspective you get when you play simulator battles, because obviously no third person in simulator battles, or at least not technically. But you can't zoom out any further, so if you want to be able to see behind your tank to tell if some shitless blocking you, tough luck. You'll have to use the free camera to turn around and look behind yourself. Once again, hand crank turret takes forever to turn, so it can be a pain to circle people, but if you are able to get in behind them, you can really ruin their day. Of course, because of the turret traverse speeds, it actually means you get to play a lot more with your tank's positioning. You have to actually make some fancy hull maneuvers to bring the gun to bear sometimes. And as you can see there, Ali absolutely just nuking that guy with its machine guns. Battle's nearly over. We've captured the objective and the enemy team are running low on vehicles. So it's pretty much cleanup time at this point. There are a couple of different game modes in War Thunder. There's one which is Conquest. It's essentially like Encounter but with multiple cap zones. And then there's basically Encounter where you have one sort of zone to cap. I can't remember the names of them, I'm not good with specifics. Honestly, I don't focus on the game types, I just focus on blowing tanks up. But there's enough variety in it to make it interesting, and there's also enough variety in the maps and time of day and weather conditions. So I definitely think I'll be playing this a lot more, and hopefully we'll be getting some more videos out, possibly including some live play. Hope you enjoyed the video. I wish you the best of luck in the field, and I will see you on the next one.